Hello and welcome to my Patch 105 multiplayer balance update, thoughts and analysis. I'm going to be doing one of these every single time a balance update comes out, so just to give you an insight of what I think about this, I will be covering all the points on the balance sheet, and I will also be covering the undocumented changes which have come out, because I think it's important to get that information out too. So let's get into it. The player abilities are the first thing, and the first thing on there is melee. Now, melee was in a weird position. I mean, people turn to melee builds because powers and weapons aren't in the best of places right now. I didn't like the whole meleeing everything to death is perfectly viable on gold strategy, but people did it, and as a result, they've changed it so player melee attacks can now be interrupted by enemy attacks. This is only going to be applicable to armoured enemies, so things like berserkers, for example. You can't just sort of stand there and punch them to death. They will interrupt your attacks. I think it's a good thing, but again, I think the viability of melee was only so sort of emphasized because of the lack of viability of a lot of weapons and powers. So that's my thoughts on that. Challenge tracking, I won't cover that. That's just some bug fixes, which is a good thing, I think. Stealth Grid and Biot Extension now work off-host, which is a very welcome change, to me at least. I play the Angara Avenger a lot, so having Stealth Grid work off-host is really, really good, and it's a welcome change. So let's move straight on to weapons. Now, I was hoping for some more here. I mean, I honestly think that the buffs they've done are sort of testing the waters of what they can get away with. You have to keep in mind that some weapons, once they pass a certain threshold, they go from being pretty mediocre or, even underpowered to incredibly overpowered. I mean, in the case of sniper rifles, for example, if one headshot is going to kill an armoured enemy, if you buff the damage by 1 point, for example, then that becomes a lot more viable on gold, as opposed to having it be 2 shots to kill on gold. So it's very difficult to balance weapons, and I'm not saying that BioWare has done the best thing they could possibly do here, because I think they could have done better, and I think they could have analysed a lot more and implemented changes which reflect how underpowered some weapons are. Having said that, the Matuk has now got its fire rate increased and its damage lowered. I think there's no real reason to have the damage lowered. We're at a point now where the Predator is doing more damage than the Matuk, so as for the other weapons, the Sandstorm Sweeper, Valkyrie Halberd, Carnifex, Hornet Phalanx, Scorpion, Hesh, Shadow, Indra, Vanquisher, they've all had various nerfs and buffs. The Vanquisher has got its 100% headshot bonus removed from it. I'm pretty sure this was considered a bug in the community to begin with, so it's still a really good rifle. I mean, I have used it since the update. It's still really strong. I just feel that it's more in line with its rarity, and there's more reason to use weapons like the Black Widow and Valiant now, I guess, which is the Vanquisher's ultra rare counterparts. So I think that's a good thing. Indra looks kind of viable now. I'll be trying that one out for sure. Everything else is kind of meh. There's no massive changes. Nothing has really become brokenly overpowered as a result of these buffs. They're still pretty mediocre, and I think more weapon tweaking is needed here. Weapon reloads, fix some timings of reload actions so they better match their animations. That's again just bug fixes. More bug fixes. Right, enemies. Ket Anointed. Players can no longer avoid damage by standing up against firing Anointed. I mean, it's obviously a bug, so that's a bug fix. That's not a buff in any way. Ascendant's Orbs will now give 15 points when killed instead of points equal to the Ascendant himself. Again, more bug fixes. And Ket Behemoths are more likely to target nearby players. So there's no buffs or nerfs here. This is just fixing bugs, I guess. There's no significant sort of impact on gameplay against Ket. I don't think, anyway. Outlaws. Now, Outlaws were by far and wide the easiest faction to fight against on gold. I have said for ages that Silver Ket is harder than gold Outlaws, but so it's good to see that they've actually taken note of that and buffed the enemy. Outlaw Ardis. adhes. Adhes can no longer chain sync attacks, which is something which was really annoying. I've had it happen in solo attempts, and it's incredibly annoying to happen, so good to see that changed. Agents, holographic clone no longer give points, no real gameplay changing thing there. Now, sharpshooters. Sharpshooters now fire more frequently, especially against targets out of cover. Sniper rifle damage is increased. Sharpshooters sprint more often. Aiming time is now shortened at shorter ranges. Aiming and impact audio are now clearer and no longer pursue melee targets over long distances. Now, the sharpshooter I don't feel was actually that powerful. In the sense that it never really posed a threat. When you saw the laser, it was the same sort of deal with the Nemesis in Mass Effect 3. I mean, they shield gated you, but they weren't a huge threat to your life, and because it took so long for them to shoot, it wasn't really something which you worried about too much, especially if you're playing a tanky character. Now the sharpshooters actually seem like they will be something to actually worry about. If you see the red laser on you, then you'll want to get into cover. And I think that's their intended purpose, is to be a sort of suppressor of people just, running around and punching everything to death. I think it's a good thing. I think buffing sharpshooters is a good thing. Outlaw berserkers. Berserkers more likely to target nearby players. And again, that's a sort of... I wouldn't say it's a bug fix, but it's common sense. If an enemy is if a friendly is lighting a berserker up and it's targeting a player which is miles away, then obviously that's not intended, and it's counterintuitive. Outlaw Hydra. Sync attack is now lethal. I think this is a really good change. I know it might be controversial to some because previously only the Kets had sync attacks. Outlaw Hydras, they did sync you, but you could survive that ground smash if you had enough damage resistance or shields and health. I think it always should have been lethal. The Atlas mech in Mass Effect 3, that had a lethal melee attack, and I think the Hydra really does need something like that. I mean, you had people like Vanguards charging and then punching Hydras to death, which is ridiculous, I think, anyway. Hydras now lose their target but no longer cancel firing when their target cloaks while locking on. That's something which... When you were playing an infiltrator, then Hydras would lock onto you. You could just cloak and they would immediately lose their lock-on. So I think it's good that they will fire, but now, I guess that they won't home in on you in the same way as they would if they were fully locked onto you. A fixed situation where a Hydra's body would reappear after being destroyed. That's, again, just bug fixes. So, all in all, I think it's really good that they've buffed the Outlaws. I think the Remnant and Ket was so much harder, and you had a situation where every public lobby you joined, at least every public lobby I joined, had a sort of 90% chance of being Outlaws against... Outlaws on Zero or Sandstorm or Outlaw Random. It was always Outlaws anyway. It was the fastest, it was the easiest. I mean, it sort of went with the sort of fire-based white thing we saw in Mass Effect 3. You have one sort of map and enemy choice which is significantly easier than the rest, then people are going to farm that. And I think it's always nice to have, variety in games. I think BioWare should put a modifier on XP or credit rewards for doing random. Because that was a thing in Mass Effect 3, and it gives incentive for lobbies to open that up to random, and it's fun. It's nice having, variety in the games you play. So, let's move on to Remnant. We found that the Observer was too good at its job, leaving players totally pinned down. It could be frustrating while another Observer flanked the player, or when a Nullifier attacked. Okay, so, Remnant Observers. Observers now lose the target while firing when the target cloaks. It's a good thing, I think. I don't think any enemy should be able to track you perfectly, like the Observers used to be able to when you're cloaked. Maximum beam duration decreased from 6 seconds to 5. Beam damage decreased by 10%, so it's a nerf across the board, really. I think it's a good thing. Again, I think Observers were the strongest and most scary enemy on the Remnant faction. We'll see how it plays out. It's not a huge nerf, so I can't imagine... you will still get the situations where they will punish you hard for being out of cover, but I think that's their intended purpose, sort of similar to the sharpshooter. They're there to punish you for being out of position. Nullifiers. Rate of fire has been decreased against enemies in cover. Projectile attacks now travel faster and hit harder, stays still and fires in more situations, no longer flees in protracted melee situations. And then there's a single player change. Nullifiers, again, they're sort of like the Ravagers back in Mass Effect 3, but they're not nearly as lethal. I would have liked to have seen their damage being increased and perhaps firing more slowly or not being able to fire through cover. I think they're supposed to be the artillery of the Remnant faction, and I think having them fill a sort of suppressive role like Ravagers did would be a very good thing. But we'll see how it turns out. I think it's not really enough to go one way or the other on nullifiers. And destroyers are more likely to target nearby players, again makes sense, and fixed a bug with them. So now that the documented changes are out of the way, let's go on to the undocumented changes that have happened. So I'll try and be very quick with this. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to add information like video or pictures for all of these things, just because I haven't extensively played the update yet, so I haven't actually seen these, but these are things which have been documented on Reddit, on BSN, so I just think it's important to get that information out there as soon as possible. So let's go through these really quickly. Krogan Rage has a fainter visual, so basically what happened was the Krogan, when it activated Rage, basically gave you epilepsy, so this has been reduced, so great thing, fantastic. I was hoping this was in the changes. Hunter mode never got this update, but Rage has, so fantastic. The Inferno sniper rifle's been added. It's an ultra rare sniper. I'm not sure how good it is. I'll have to try it when I get it. I haven't been lucky enough to get it out of a pack yet. Solarian Architect, it's a rare character. I am not sure how this one is either. What I've heard from people is it's not very strong, but I'll have to try it myself. Again, haven't had the chance to get this out of a pack yet. Character selection has a rarity filter option along with a lot of other UI changes, so there's been updates to a lot of the UI and menus and loading screens and things like that. One of the big ones, which I think I should touch on, is the modifier of Apex missions is now stated in the lobby rather than just saying modifier, like ×1 modifier, for example. This was really important for people who were joining Apex missions and didn't know what the modifiers were, so it was difficult to sort of plan your kit around what those modifiers were. So that's something I think I should touch on. There's a couple of changes to objective waves. Disabling devices is much faster now. I'm not sure why this was done. I don't think I saw anyone complaining about the length of devices. I think maybe shortening them a little bit, because I believe they are shorter than Mass Effect 3's devices, but anyway, they weren't particularly difficult. I never had any issues with them. If you coordinated as a team, they were fine. Anyway, assassinations, you can now get bosses spawn as assassinations. So before, you never used to be able to get Hydras, Fiends, Ascendants, Destroyers. You never used to be able to get those as high-value targets. Now you can. This is fine for team play. I don't think there's any real issue here. The problem I have with it is in solo runs, this makes assassinations very problematic. Reason being is that Cobras don't insta-kill bosses now, unless you hit them in crit spots. Ascendants will always eat one Cobra missile through its orb, and the second one won't necessarily kill it, so you could be using 3 rockets per Ascendant, and you will have multiple Ascendants as high-value targets on these waves, so makes that objective type much, much harder for soloing, but it doesn't necessarily change much in team play, because you can always, team shot a Destroyer or a Hydra. Can't do that so much in solo runs. Anyway. And nameplates now stick now, so before you used to equip a nameplate and after the match it would be gone. So this has been fixed. It's a nice improvement to what was before. I will actually be able to equip my Ket Mastery nameplate now to show off that I'm not a pussy. What else? The Avenger Strike has been changed. It's not been buffed, but before, when you used to hit enemies in the air, often you wouldn't do any damage at all, so that's apparently been fixed now. Tactical Cloak has had a couple of changes to it. The speed boost rank has been changed from 15% movement speed increase to 20%, and there was also a bug with rank 6 Tactical Cloak whereby if you chose the 2-second damage duration, you'd always get the full cooldown. Now if you activate Tactical Cloak and you break and deactivate it quick enough, then you'll get reduced cooldowns. But with this evolution, you always got the full cooldown, which was in the ballpark of 15 to 20 seconds, which is not ideal. Number of strike team missions has gone up to 9 now, so there's more of those to do. Another big one was when using custom keybinds, for PC users, you can break free of things which grab you. So the dogs and the breaches, when they grabbed you, you used to spam E, and if you change that key, then you wouldn't be able to break free. So that's a good thing for PC users. It's nice to see PC-specific fixes there. One really nice thing is that now when you are in the character customization screen, you can actually see what the what impact your evolutions have had on the power's cooldown, or power's damage, your power's recharge speed, whatever. It's all that information is there, and I think that's fantastic. It was something which I know was noted as missing from Mass Effect 3. They fixed I made a video on this, and they fixed the exploits which allowed you to transfer customization options to other characters which didn't have it. So I guess my Avenger hasn't got its fancy patterns now, but we always expected that to be fixed. Oh, and one last thing which I think is the most important balance change. It's not a balance change, it's a fix, and that is there's been improvements to latency and networking issues, and from what I've seen is there's been less crashes, so there's been stability improvements as well. I can't begin to say how welcome this change is. It's such a problematic thing for some users, and there were people who were crashing out every second game. Unfortunately, I don't think this has been resolved entirely, but again, we live in the sort of environment where we have peer-to-peer networking. We don't have dedicated servers for this game, so we're never going to get perfect network resolutions. But anyway, it's a massive step in the right direction on that front, and I totally commend BioWare for throwing that out 2 weeks after launch. So, all in all, I think this update is a good thing. I know that might come as a surprise to some of you, because there has been a lot of fallout over the forums about this, and I don't agree with it for the most part. I think it's a really good step in the right direction. You have to keep in mind that balance changes and fixes and things like that don't come in 2 weeks. We're not going to get a game which is finished and totally balanced and in a really good place in that respect in 2 weeks. It's just not going to happen. In Mass Effect 3, it took months and months and months of patching and balance updates and buffs and nerfs to get the game into this sort of sweet spot it's in now. And I think that game did end up in a very good place in terms of balance. I think, as I said, this is a step in the right direction. I think there's things which do need looking at. There's no denying that BioWare seems to have not taken a lot of feedback from users into consideration, especially when applying buffs to weapons, and there hasn't been any sort of mention or touching on combo damage, power damage, that sort of thing. And instead they've sort of gone the other way and decided to preemptively nerf melee. But I think once we get updates which increase the viability of weapon builds and power builds and combo-centered builds, such as like the Paladin in Mass Effect 3, I think the melee nerf specifically isn't going to be that big of an issue anymore. So, without going on too much about it, I will summarize with, it's not the best update ever. It's not the update I was looking for. There was a lot of things in this update which I am glad to have seen fixed in terms of bug fixes. In terms of weapon balance and the overall sort of balance changing around gameplay, I'm not exactly thrilled to see it. There's some things I don't like. I don't like the changes to the Matic, for example, even though I never really used it. I don't think it was warranted, and I also don't think the devices need to be buffed. There's no reason for it, I don't think. I also don't think there was any reason to really buff assassinations. But there you go. We'll see where the game ends up in a few weeks' time. I'm optimistic, honestly. I honestly am, and some of you will know me, and as a person who is very critical of BioWare, and if they were if they had totally screwed this patch up, then I would be the absolute first person to jump on them and, say, get your shit together. But I don't. I think it's a good step in the right direction. They're not being oblivious to everything going on. They've addressed questions and things like that and concerns on Twitter, on the forums, on Reddit. I haven't seen them on BSN, but on Reddit, certainly, there's a few developers who are active on that platform. As I said before, Twitter, they've addressed that they're going to be looking at combo damage and power damage and more weapon balance changes. It's a first step. It's the first balance change, and we can't expect that there's going to be no improvement after this. There will be more balance changes. So I think we should all maybe take a step back. If you want to take a break from the game, then do so and maybe wait for the next balance update, but I certainly won't be playing any less. I won't be playing any more, but I won't be playing any less either, and I won't be enjoying the game any less as a result of these balance changes. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I'll see you in the next balance update to give my thoughts and opinions. This is all unscripted, and it's really just what comes to mind when I see and play these updates, so I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.